So in this problem, what we're going to go through is when we have a convertible bond. So a convertible bond is where it's the same idea as a regular bond, right? There's going to be an interest rate, there's going to be a maturity period, a face amount, all of that will still be true. But it comes with what's known as a conversion option. So that conversion option essentially gives the bond holder, so the person who's holding the bond, it gives them the option of keeping their bond or converting it into shares of common stock. So a lot of times organizations will want to issue these convertible bonds because they're viewed as a more flexible investment to the bond holder, because they have sort of the choice of whether or not they would want to keep it as a bond and receive their interest payments, or if they would want to change that to common stock. So it creates a situation where the bond actually has more value because of that flexibility. A lot of times investors like this option too, because from the investor's standpoint, they can take a look at, okay, does it make more sense? Will it give us a better return if we keep the bond and just keep our annual interest or semi-annual or whatever it is, interest payments coming in? Or does it appear as though the common stock is appreciating in value to the point where it would make more sense and give us a better return on our investment if we convert this bond investment into shares of common stock? So it creates that flexibility, allows the bond holder to sort of decide how they want their investments to be. And it's an advantage for the issuing company, because more often than not, if the bond comes with a conversion option, it will be issued at a premium price. It'll be issued at a price that's more than the face amount. Even if the stated rate is less than the market rate of interest, that conversion option gives so much value to that bond that more often than not, a convertible bond is going to be issued at a premium price over, versus if the bond did not have that conversion option. So let's look at what an example of this would be. We're going to go on January 1st, 2021. We're going to issue $100 million worth of convertible bonds. Our bonds have a stated interest rate of 8%. The bonds are issued at 103. So this is something that's a little bit different than what we've talked about so far. So far in our examples, what we've done is we've taken all of the data points, right? Future value payment, rate, number of periods, and type, and we've calculated the value of the bond. What this problem is doing is oftentimes how bonds are quoted in the investing market is by percentages, the percentage of face amount. So if the bond is issued at 103, what that means is that the bond was issued at 103% of the face amount. So obviously that's a premium. Anything above 100% of the face amount is going to be a premium. So in this example, we actually do not have to go through the process of calculating the present value. It's given to us in the problem. We're told that these convertible bonds were issued at 103. And again, a lot of times why these bonds would be issued at higher than the face amount at a premium price, even if our interest rate, even if our stated interest rate is less than the market rate, there still may be a premium associated with our bond because of the fact that we're giving the bondholders this flexible arrangement that they can kind of decide whether they want to keep it a bond or whether they want to convert it into common stock. So because of that, we're able to issue at this premium price. Okay, so some additional information about these convertible bonds. Each one bond is can be converted into 40 shares of common stock. So one bond can be converted into 40 shares of common stock. And as is normally the case, each individual bond is worth $1,000, So we issued, our total amount issued was $100 million worth of bonds. Each one of those bonds individually has a face amount of $1,000. And that's typically the case. Bond values will come in increments of $1,000 face amounts. And then just additional piece of information, we are going to assume that the company recently issued the same types of bonds, 10 years, 8%, but they did not have a conversion option. And look, they were issued at 98. What this would mean is 98% of the face amount. So again, what we're doing is just showing, with that additional piece of information, we're just showing how much this conversion option really affects the value of the bond. If these bonds were issued without a conversion option, they would actually have been issued at a discount. But because they have a conversion option with associated with it, then the bonds were issued at a premium price. So again, this second bullet point here is just it's not used in the problem. It's just illustrating how much of a how much value the conversion option adds to the bond. Okay, and then finally, at the end of 2028, so this is the date upon which we are going to actually convert some of these bonds into common stock. In 2028, half of the bonds are converted into common stock. At that time, we had $1.6 million remaining on our bond premium. So remember, if we issued at 103% of the face amount, that would mean that we would have a premium, and we're going to see this in the journal entry coming up. We would have a premium on that bond of $3 million. So what we're assuming here is over time, we would have already amortized $1.4 million of that premium. So there's $1.6 million of that premium remaining. We need that information. We need to know how much premium do we have still on our books, because when we convert these bonds into common stock, we need to show that conversion on our accounting record. So our journal entry is going to have to include removing the bonds from our books and putting the common stock on our books. So that's why we need to understand what that premium value is at the time of conversion. Okay, so let's take all of that information. Again, we can see it here listed. We issued for a face amount of $100 million. Our interest rate, stated interest rate is 8%. It's a 10-year maturity period. They were issued for 103% of face. So notice the calculation, $100 million times 103% gives us $103 million. The conversion ratio is 40 shares per one bond, and each bond has a value of $1,000. So what I did here, just to sort of exhibit what the actual amount of the investment, each investment option is. If we had $100 million worth of bonds, and each one of those bonds had a value of $1,000, $100 million divided by $1,000 tells us how many bonds are actually outstanding. When we issue these bonds, how many of them are there? There are 100,000 bonds out in the investing public's hands. And then if we take that conversion ratio, it says that for each one bond, 40 shares of common stock can be, each one bond can be converted into 40 shares of common stock. So how many potential shares of common stock would be outstanding if every single one of those bondholders converted their bonds into common shares? 100,000 bonds times 40 shares gives us the potential of 4 million shares becoming outstanding. So again, we're not necessarily going to use these figures in our journal entries, but just so we have an understanding of what physically is out in the investing market right now. Right now, there's going to be 100,000 bonds out in the market, but there could potentially be 4 million shares if every one of those bondholders converts into common stock. Okay, so now let's think about the journal entries. On January 1st, 2021, we actually issued these bonds out into the market at a premium price of $103 million. So we're going to just show in our journal entry, debit cash for $103 million. Then we're going to credit premium on bond payable and bond payable. The bond payable is always going to be listed at its face amount, $100 million. And then the premium is just going to be the $3 million difference, right? $103 million is how much cash we got. $100 million is how much the face amount is. The premium is going to be $3 million. So as with all the other examples, every 6 months we would have been recording interest expense and interest paid, and we would have been amortizing our premium over that time. Remember, in the problem it told us that there is $1.6 million left on that premium. Again, we need to know that information because in 2028, the half of the bonds, half of them get converted into common stock. So on 2028, the first thing that we want to do is wipe off of our accounting records half of those bonds. We're saying half of them are converted into common shares. So we want to debit bond payable for half of the total face amount that we had outstanding. Half, right? Because half of them are being converted into common shares. So $50 million of bonds are being wiped clean from our accounting records. We still have $50 million of outstanding bond payable, but half of the total $100 million, $50 million is being wiped clean from our accounting records. Step 2, as it says, if we are wiping half of the bond payable off of our accounting records, then half of the remaining premium needs to also be taken off of our accounting records or needs to be retired. So we're going to debit premium on bond payable. And in the problem, it told us that there is $1.6 million left on the bond premium. And again, we want to remove or retire half of that. So we're going to retire $800,000 worth of that bond premium is also going to be wiped off of our accounting records with that debit. And then step 3, the last thing that we would do is just show common stock outstanding. Now notice, the one thing that students often want to do when it comes to these convertible bond problems is to show that cash was received by the company for the issuance of common stock. That is not what is happening here. In this case, we are trading one investment for the other. The investors traded in their bonds, and in exchange, we gave them common stock. No cash trades hands. There was no selling of common stock. It was a simple trading of investments, bonds for common shares. So when we go to account for the common stock is very simply going to be the value of the bonds that were traded in. We don't necessarily take into account the actual going market price of those shares on the date that this conversion happens. We just take into consideration what did those bondholders trade in exchange for common stock. Whatever they traded in, whatever the value of those bonds and the premium was that they traded in, that then becomes the implicit value of the common shares that those bondholders now have. So that is again the example of a bond that comes with a conversion option. The option that the bondholder can convert those bond